Alright, let's talk about the first approach, which is rhetorical questions. And a rhetorical question is a question you ask to your audience without having them to reply on it, right? So you ask a question and the audience isn't going to give a vocal reply or any hand gestures, you just want to make them think along. In my opinion, it's a very powerful approach as long as it's executed properly. So there are two main approaches when it comes down to asking questions rhetorically. So the first one is you want to ask temporal questions, and the second one is guiding questions. And let's jump into the second one first, because what is a guiding question? A guiding question is you introducing a subject or building a bridge between two different subjects by asking a question. Like I just did right before it, when I mentioned, when I asked you guys, what are guiding questions and how could you use it? Introducing a subject by asking a question is something a bit contrary to what the IBMS or IB team is explaining you, because the IB team probably explains to you, you need to say what you're going to talk about. So when it comes down to a formal meeting or formal business presentation, you need to say, okay, I'm going to talk about or explain my finances. Now I'm going to head towards my marketing plan. You are required to introduce your subject by statements. Try and do this with questions instead of statements. So how are the finances going to be impacted when this new product of mine is going to be taken into the portfolio of the company? Or how are we going to penetrate the market with this product? Or how are we going to revolutionize the way people are living when we introduce this new whatever it is that you came up with? Asking questions means that your audience is going to guess in their minds and they become automatically more intrigued into your subject, and they just want to know what the final answer is. Like they have a couple of things in their minds and they want to hear from you what the right approach is going to be in the end. But this is something that can be done in formal meetings, like going from subject to subject, but also in like storytelling aspects. So if I'm doing a story about a boy, I would say, okay, after his childhood, how did he turn up to grow up? How did he turn up when he was like 21? So in this case, I've probably spoken about his childhood, and now I'm going to see and explain to you guys how his future career or his future developments went on. Asking questions basically lets you introduce a new subject, but if you want to do it even more powerful, you want to use them as bridges and also close off the previous subject. So when it comes down to a formal presentation, I would have said, okay, knowing the finance, knowing our marketing approach, why would this product be even bought by the company? Let me rephrase that real quickly. So basically what I'm trying to say is you could use questions also to close off a subject and introduce the next one. This is the best part, right? You're building the bridge between those two. So let's say you have finished all the subjects from a formal presentation, and the final one is going to be like the success of the company or the success of the idea. So we know that the product can penetrate the market. We know we can revolutionize the product. We know marketing won't be an issue. How are the finances of the company going to be? What is the profit we can actually make after it? That's like combining or closing off the separate or the previous subjects and going into the next one. And if you can combine those, your story becomes really cohesive. And that's about asking questions, right? So the easy approach is just ask a question about the next subject, introduce it. And the more advanced approach will be to finish off and basically reflect upon your previous subject and then introduce your next subject with a question. So that's like guiding questions, right? And this can be done in the opening, but mainly is used between subjects, so alongside your story. And it's up to you how to do so, but I heavily recommend you guys in applying it. Then the second approach is temporal questions, and this is more often used at the beginning of your question, of your story, of your presentation. Temporal question basically means you're going to ask a couple of questions in a row. This can be done in two different approaches again. First of all is being a constant approach, and the second one would be more a digging approach. In case of the first one, what you want to do is ask a couple of questions which can be completely separated from each other. But the important one is that you're going to make sure that you ask the questions on a similar pace, on a similar tone, and perhaps make an all combined question at the end in which you reflect on all the questions. But this can be about basically anything, and the better approach, in my own opinion, is the digging approach. So you're going to ask a broad question and then you're going to start diving into it more specifically. So an example could be, okay, what's the first thing you remember from when you were a child? Okay, then I'll let the audience think for 1 or 2 seconds. Okay, now think about that moment and think about other people that were in that moment. Could you still know which people who were in that moment? And I'll continue a bit more. Do you even remember the age you were at that point? It's asking questions and diving a bit deeper into the specific subject. So it's basically going from your broad question into a more specific one every single time. And in this case, you also want to try and speed up the process a little bit. So the first approach is a bit more consistent in pace, and the second one is going to be a bit more, building up the speed alongside the way. I have a video that I'm going to post alongside with this video, which is going to explain or going to show you another approach, which is the what if approach. And with the what if approach is he asks, I think it's like 18 questions back to back, starting every sentence with what if. And this is a really interesting approach as well, but please feel free to try out what works best for you. So this is the first main subject, which is rhetorical questions. So there are 2 approaches. You want to guide them throughout your story, or you want, or as well, it can be applied both, of course, or you want to ask multiple questions back to back. Because when it comes down to rhetorical questions, the audience needs to understand that they're not required to give a reply, that you're not looking for a reply. So asking multiple questions could be about separate subjects, but the best way in doing so is beginning with a broader, more global question and then slowly diving into it. So the audience understands that you're just going to ask a couple of questions back to back. So that's the first main subject. Now it's going to be time to head to the next one.